Michael Jordan watches footage of his last game alone, then whispers, "I wish he saw this." Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today, and if you like this story, don't forget to subscribe. The room was quiet, dimly lit except for the soft blue glow of the massive screen in front of him. Michael Jordan sat in the only seat in the private home theater, shoulders still broad but slightly hunched now, as if the weight of memory bore down heavier than it used to. The footage of his final NBA game was rolling, unedited, raw. Every moment played like it was yesterday. The crowd's roar. The screech of sneakers. The flick of his wrist as the ball left his fingers and swished clean through the net. He didn't smile. Didn't flinch. He simply watched. He tapped the remote and rewound to one particular moment. The final shot. The move to his right, crossover, the defender stumbling. The release. Perfect. Time frozen. Again, he rewound. And again. The sixth time, he let it play all the way through. The arena erupted. His teammates swarmed him. His name chanted like a war cry. Still, he didn't move. Outside, the world probably assumed MJ was enjoying a quiet retirement. Maybe a round of golf earlier, maybe a fine drink waiting in the kitchen. But in here, he wasn't the legend. He was the boy from Wilmington who never forgot who pushed him when it mattered. His fingers tightened around the remote. "I wish he saw this," he whispered. The words didn't echo. They landed like a stone in water, disappearing into the silence. He stared at the empty seat beside him. It had never been sat in. Not once. Not even when the room was built. The screen faded into commercial break footage, back then, recorded straight from television. The commentary. The analysis. The praise. He wasn't listening. His mind drifted. A gym. The smell of sweat and sawdust. A wooden bench, the kind that gave you splinters if you weren't careful. 15-year-old Mike, drenched in effort, sat hunched over with his head in his hands. The scoreboard still burned above him, loss. "You play scared," said the voice. Direct. Unapologetic. Mike looked up. Coach Taylor stood there, arms crossed, expression flat. "You waited. You hesitated," Coach continued. "You had the lane. You passed it." "I didn't think I could make it," the boy admitted. Coach shook his head. "Then you shouldn't be here." It stung. It always stung. But Coach didn't say things to hurt. He said them to spark. The next morning, Mike showed up before dawn. The gym was still dark. Coach was already there, bouncing a ball under the one working light. No words. Just a nod. Back in the present, MJ blinked. The screen now showed post-game interviews. His younger self being asked about legacy, pressure, greatness. All the buzzwords. He said the right things. Smiled. Thanked his team. Thanked the fans. But not Coach. He'd meant to. Always meant to. But Coach didn't like being named. Said it ruined the purity of the work. MJ stood up slowly, joints stiff. He walked to a side cabinet and opened the top drawer. Inside was a stack of old VHS tapes. Game footage, interviews, handwritten notes. And at the bottom, an envelope. Worn. Yellowed with time. It had never been opened. He stared at it. Turned it over. Postmarked 2 weeks before his last game. Return address, none. He sat back down, holding the envelope. His thumb hovered over the flap but didn't open it yet. Another memory came, years later, well into his career. An off-season visit. He'd gone back to see Coach. The man was slower then. A cane. A tremble in his left hand. But the eyes were the same, sharp, focused, unsparing. "Still playing?" Coach had asked, pouring tea with the precision of a surgeon. "Thinking of retiring," MJ replied. Coach raised a brow. Tired? Not really. Then why stop? I don't know. I've done it all. Coach had leaned forward. So what? You stopped doing what you love because you checked some boxes? MJ had laughed. You're still coaching, huh? I never stopped, Coach said. Even when no one listens. That was the last time they spoke face to face. Back in the present, MJ finally slid his finger under the flap and opened the envelope. But before he pulled the letter out, he paused. There was a knock at the theater door. He frowned. No one was supposed to come in. A familiar voice came through. Mike? You okay? It was his longtime friend and former teammate, Charles. MJ didn't answer. After a few seconds, the door opened slightly. Charles peeked in, then saw the screen paused on that iconic final shot. Didn't mean to intrude, man. Just, we're all downstairs. MJ waved him off, still staring at the letter. You never told him, huh? Charles said quietly, stepping inside. About that seat. MJ didn't answer. Charles sat on the arm of the other seat, the one that had always been left untouched. I remember asking once. You said, it's for someone who doesn't like the crowd. Took me a while to get it. He said he'd wait for the last one, MJ said, voice low. I remember. So did he make it? MJ looked down at the letter again. I don't know. I never asked. Never dared to. Charles looked at the screen, then at MJ. You know, you were different that game. Like you were playing for someone. Not for the cameras. Not the legacy. Just for the game. MJ nodded slowly. I'll leave you to it, Charles said, standing. But Mike? Yeah? If he didn't see it, he still knew. The door clicked shut. MJ was alone again. He unfolded the letter. Inside, just 3 words. I'll be there. His hand trembled slightly. He stared at the handwriting. Definitely Coach's. That signature Lupiar. No flourish. No dramatic farewell. Just a promise. He looked over at the seat again. For a moment, he almost saw someone sitting there, arms crossed, nodding slowly. MJ hit play. The final seconds of the game rolled again. He didn't flinch. Didn't blink. He let it play all the way to the end. The screen faded to black. Credits rolled from the live TV recording, cut off awkwardly as the VHS ended with a soft click. MJ didn't move. The letter rested on his lap, creased now from the way he had gripped it. His eyes were locked on the seat beside him, still empty, still untouched. He stood, stretched out his back, and walked to a shelf built into the wall. Rows of tapes sat labeled in black marker, some from his high school days, some marked with only dates. He pulled one from the middle and placed it into the old player. It clicked, word, and then the screen lit up again. The footage was shaky, clearly handheld. A younger Mike, maybe 17, stood on an outdoor court. No crowd. Just one-on-one drills, sweat pouring, the sun beating down. And behind the camera was the unmistakable voice. Drive. Stop. Pivot. Again. Coach Taylor's words were never gentle, but never cruel. There was belief in them. Structure. Why are you filming this, Coach? Mike asked off-screen, catching his breath. So you can see yourself. I can tell you're sloppy. But seeing it? That's different. The younger MJ wiped his face with his shirt and nodded. And if I screw up? Then you fix it. The footage paused. MJ stood in front of the screen now, arms crossed. This was a different time, before fame, before money. Back when all that existed was the game and the man who made him believe he could be more than just good. He remembered that day. The camera had died halfway through, but the lesson had gone on for hours. He switched tapes again. Another memory. This time, it was a championship game. High school state finals. MJ had been phenomenal, unstoppable. But the footage wasn't of the game. It was of the locker room afterward. Coach Taylor sat in the corner, his expression unreadable. "You don't need me to tell you what you did wrong?" he asked. MJ, barely catching his breath, just looked at him. "All right," Coach said, standing. "Then you're ready." "Ready for what?" young MJ asked. "People are gonna cheer for you now," Coach said. "Don't let it soften you. You still haven't met real pain." Back in the present, MJ sighed. He remembered feeling angry that day. He'd just won the biggest game of his life, and Coach couldn't even say good job. But now he understood. He turned the projector off. Silence returned. He stepped out of the theater, walked down a hallway filled with framed jerseys, photos with world leaders, magazine covers. But none of that caught his attention. He headed to the study, opened a drawer, and pulled out a notebook. Old leather. Worn from years of use. He flipped through the pages, most of them filled with thoughts, training ideas, occasional frustrations. Then he stopped on one. Written during his second year in the league. "Coach says I'm slipping. Too much TV. Too many people talking." I wanted to argue, but he's right. I've been playing to shut people up. Not because I love the game. Gotta reset. He closed the notebook. He didn't realize he'd kept that page all these years. Back then, he would call Coach after almost every game. Not to hear praise, just to hear something real. Something that cut through the noise. But then came the fame, the distractions. The call slowed. Then stopped. He picked up the phone and scrolled through contacts. Taylor's number was still there. He never deleted it. He stared at it for a long time. Eventually, he set the phone down. That final season had been different. He'd come back older, slower, but smarter. There was a purpose in every move. People thought it was about ego, but it wasn't. He wasn't trying to prove anything to fans, media, or even teammates. He was playing for one person. The one who'd said he'd wait for the last one. MJ went back to the theater, sat down again, and started the footage from the last game one more time. This time, he didn't just watch the plays. He watched the way he moved, the way his teammates looked at him. The trust. The fire. Then, he saw it. At the edge of a crowd shot, nosebleeds, not courtside, a man standing, arms crossed, slightly hunched. MJ paused it. Zoomed in as far as the old video quality would allow. Grainy, blurry. Couldn't see a face. But the stance. The build. The presence. It was enough. He didn't know if it was Coach. Could have been anyone. But in that moment, he believed. He looked at the envelope again. "I'll be there." MJ wasn't a man of drama. He never bought into fairy tales. But something about that letter, the voice in the footage, and that lone silhouette hit different. He stood, walked over to the empty seat, and sat down in it for the first time. He looked at the screen. Then back at his own seat. "I saved this for you," he muttered. He sat there a while, saying nothing. He didn't cry. He didn't need to. Eventually, he got up, grabbed the envelope, and walked to his bedroom. On the way, he passed a photo he usually ignored. It was small, faded. Him and Coach Taylor, standing side by side after a summer league tournament. No medals. No press. Just two people who knew what the other was capable of. He smiled at it for the first time in years. That night, before sleeping, he tucked the letter into the front of a worn journal and closed it. Tomorrow, maybe he'd call someone. Maybe he'd share the story. But tonight, it was just between him and the man who made him more than an athlete. And the seat would never be empty again. The sun had already dipped behind the trees outside as Michael stepped out onto his backyard patio the next morning. The sky was quiet, just like the night before. He hadn't slept much, but it wasn't restlessness, it was reflection. Something inside had shifted. The letter, the tapes, the silhouette in the crowd. All of it. He sipped his coffee, watching the breeze ripple through the trees. A memory crept in, one he hadn't thought about in years. It was 1994, shortly after his father's passing. Most people assumed Michael disappeared into baseball to escape grief. That was true. But what they didn't know was that, just days after the funeral, he'd driven to a small house just outside Asheville. Coach Taylor's house. He hadn't called. He just showed up. Coach opened the door like he'd been expecting it. "You don't knock anymore," he said dryly, but the hint of concern in his eyes gave it away. "I didn't want to talk to anyone," Michael said. "You didn't. You came here." They sat in silence on the porch, the cicadas chirping in the background. "Everything feel different now?" Coach asked. Michael nodded. "Good. It should." "What's good about that?" Coach leaned forward. "Means you're still human." Michael didn't answer. He stared into the trees, just like he was doing now. Back in the present, he stood up and walked back inside. The house was quiet, everything in its place. No press. No staff. No distractions. He walked to a storage room, unlocked a cabinet, and pulled out a small wooden box. Inside were tapes Coach had mailed him over the years. Not of games, of practice, of random drills. Notes scribbled on the sides. Feet too slow. Release late. Find your center again. He pulled out one tape with no label. Just a date. 2 days before his final NBA game. He hadn't watched it. He carried it to the theater, slotted it into the machine, and sat back. The screen flickered, static clearing slowly. Then, Coach Taylor. Sitting in a chair, staring directly into the camera. "Don't know if you'll watch this before or after," he said. "Maybe never. But I figured I'd put it down." He adjusted slightly, then smirked. "I saw your interviews. All that talk about coming back for the love of the game. I know you, Mike. That wasn't all of it." MJ leaned forward. He hadn't expected this. "You're chasing something. Closure, maybe. Or redemption. Maybe you just wanted one more perfect moment." "I get it." Coach's eyes narrowed a bit. "I never told you this, but I stopped watching your games live after your first title. I didn't want to see you like everyone else did. I didn't want the spectacle. I wanted to remember the kid who stayed in the gym till the janitor kicked him out." He paused, as if trying to find the right words. "I said I'd wait for the last one. And I meant it." Coach leaned forward. "But not because I wanted to see you win. Because I wanted to see who you were when it was all on the line and no one left to impress." MJ swallowed hard. "And you know what?" Coach added. "I think you finally played for the right reason." The screen cut to black. That was it. No goodbye. No emotion. Just Coach, giving one last lesson. Michael sat still, staring at the blank screen. The last few words rang in his mind. "You finally played for the right reason." He leaned back, the old seat creaking beneath him. This wasn't about the championships, the MVPs, or the brand. It had always come back to this, why he played. For what purpose? For whom? And Coach had seen it. Later that day, he called Charles again. Asked him to meet at the old gym in Wilmington, the one they'd both played in decades ago. A few hours later, MJ pulled up to the faded building. It looked almost the same. Dusty windows. Bent rim. Echoes of the past. Charles was already there, bouncing a ball lazily. "Didn't think I'd ever see you back here," he said. Michael nodded. Figured it was time. They stepped inside. The wood floors groaned under their feet. The lines were faded, but they knew every corner. They played for a bit. Nothing serious. Just old friends, throwing up shots, missing more than they made. After a while, they sat on the bench, catching their breath. You remember when you almost quit? Charles asked. Yeah, Michael said. You were on the bench. I think it was after you got benched during the state playoffs. Michael smirked. Coach told me I didn't deserve to wear the jersey. Charles nodded. He wasn't wrong. You came back the next week like a different animal. Silence hung for a beat. You ever tell him that? Charles asked. Michael shook his head. Didn't think I needed to. Charles looked at him. You think he didn't know? I think. I wish I'd told him anyway. They sat there a while longer. As they were leaving, Michael turned and looked at the court one last time. The cracked backboard. The faded paint. But the memories were still sharp. That night, back home, he pulled out a piece of paper and began writing. Not for the public. Not for a speech. Just for himself. He wrote about the man who believed in discipline more than talent. Who taught him to look in the mirror after every game and ask, did I give everything? Not for cameras. Not for cheers. Just for the game. And then, at the end of the page, he wrote, You were right. I finally played for the right reason. I just hope you knew. He folded the letter, placed it beside the old envelope from Coach, and sat back. In the silence of the room, he felt something he hadn't in years. Peace. The next morning, Michael sat in the kitchen, staring at his cup of coffee as if the swirl of steam could offer him answers. The letter he'd written the night before rested in the center of the table. He hadn't touched it since folding it. Part of him wanted to keep it private forever, but another part whispered that maybe it was time someone else knew who really shaped his game, his heart. His assistant knocked softly and stepped in. Mr. Jordan, you've got a message. From the high school in Wilmington. He looked up. What is it? They're dedicating the new gym next month. They asked if you'd come. Michael raised an eyebrow. Didn't know they were building a new gym. They said it's in honor of the old coaching legacy. Said they want to name the court after Coach Taylor. He leaned back slowly, absorbing that. Coach never cared for his name on walls or trophies. But part of him couldn't help but wonder, had someone finally seen what he meant to people? Tell them I'll be there, Michael said. He went back to the theater that afternoon, turned off the lights, and loaded the final tape one more time. The same message. Coach, speaking simply, directly. Like he always did. No wasted words. And once again, the message ended without a goodbye. Michael reached for the remote, then stopped. He let the tape run again, just to hear the silence after Coach's voice faded. There was something comforting in it. As the screen turned black, he looked over at the envelope again. Then at the seat beside him. Why the nosebleeds, he muttered, half laughing. You could have had front row. The empty chair stayed silent. Later that week, Michael flew back to Wilmington, alone. No entourage. No cameras. Just him, the letter, and a suitcase full of memory. He didn't tell many people he was coming. The plan was to be invisible. When he arrived, the school grounds were already buzzing. He pulled his cap low as he stepped out of the car and headed toward the building. The new gym was massive. Modern. Bright lights. Glass walls. But it didn't carry the soul of the old one. He made a quiet request to visit the old gym one last time before they tore it down. A janitor recognized him. Mr. Jordan. We kept it open for you. Inside, it smelled like waxed wood and faded sweat. The air was still. The lines on the court had been repainted, but the scuff marks were still there, wounds from games past. He stepped to the free throw line and stood in place. He closed his eyes. Coach Taylor shouting from the sideline. Again. Set your feet. The voice wasn't a memory anymore. It felt like it was there, bouncing off the walls. He turned to the small wooden bleachers where Coach used to sit during practices. He walked over, sat down, and pulled the letter from his jacket. He held it for a moment, then placed it gently under the first seat. He didn't need to frame it. Didn't want anyone to find it. It wasn't for them. That night, he checked into a quiet motel nearby. Nothing fancy. No distractions. He laid in bed and thought back to his early days in the league. Back when he still called Coach after big games. He remembered the one time he dropped 55 and was sure Coach would be impressed. Instead, Coach had said, "You missed 6 free throws. Don't make me come up there." He'd laughed it off, but truth be told, that stuck with him harder than the 55. The next morning, the dedication ceremony began. Local press gathered, students in their best clothes. School staff prepared speeches. Banners hung in bold letters, Coach Nathan Taylor Court. Michael stayed in the back. He listened. They told stories, some he hadn't heard. One teacher said Coach used to keep a file cabinet full of progress notes on his players, not just for the sport, but their lives. Whether they had shoes. Whether they needed lunch. Whether their home life was falling apart. He hadn't known that. When they asked Michael to come say a few words, he hesitated. He hadn't planned to speak. But something told him it would be the last time he could. He walked slowly to the mic, cleared his throat. Coach Taylor didn't care about being remembered. He cared about who you became when no one was watching. He scanned the crowd. The younger players. The coaches. He used to say, "The world claps when you win, but who are you when you miss everything?" That stuck with me. He paused. He made me better, not just as a player. As a man. And I think the reason I never thanked him publicly was because I wasn't ready to admit how much I owed him. Until now. The crowd was silent. I don't know if he saw my last game. I don't know if he saw any of the ones after high school. But I played every single one like he was. And that was it. No fanfare. No dramatic walk-off. He handed the mic back and stepped off the court. Later, after most of the crowd had left, one of the janitors walked up to him. "Sir, I think this is yours." He held out a VHS tape. Unlabeled. Just a date. 2 days after the final game. Michael took it slowly. He hadn't seen this one before. "Where'd you get it?" "Coach left it in his locker," the janitor said. "Told me if you ever came back, to give it to you." Michael didn't answer. Just nodded, gripped the tape tightly, and walked out into the fading afternoon light. He flew home that night. Went straight to the theater. Slotted the tape in. The screen flickered to life. Coach Taylor sat in the same chair, older this time, breathing a bit heavier. "I watched it," he said. Michael froze. "I wasn't supposed to. I promised I'd wait. But I watched it anyway. Couldn't help myself." Coach smiled, just barely. "And I'm glad I did." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Because I saw a man who stopped playing for the headlines. A man who just loved the game. That's what I tried to teach you. And you got there." He paused. "I didn't sit courtside because I didn't want you looking for me. I wanted to see what you'd do when I wasn't in your sight line. But I was there." Coach gave one last look at the camera. "You made it beautiful, Mike." Then the screen cut to static. Michael sat in silence. Then leaned back. Coach had been there. All along. The screen turned to static and stayed there. Michael didn't move. He let it play, the white noise filling the room like a soft hum, as if it carried the final breath of something sacred. He reached for the remote but stopped halfway. There was no need. That final message had said everything he'd spent years wanting to hear, but never thought he would. Coach had watched the game. Maybe not from the floor, maybe not where anyone could point him out, but he was there. He saw the final shot. The poise. The clarity. The love for the game that had taken years to come full circle. And more importantly, he understood what it meant to Michael. "You made it beautiful, Mike." The words echoed, quiet but permanent. Michael stood slowly, the seat creaking beneath him. He grabbed the tape gently, like it might break. He didn't know how long it had been since he cried, not publicly, not for show, but for real. Not even when his father died. Not when he retired the first time. But now, as he looked down at the grainy VHS with that final date scribbled on the side, something cracked open. It wasn't pain. It was release. He walked out of the theater and into his office. On the desk were pieces of his legacy, awards, signed basketballs, photos with presidents, legends, world leaders. But now, they felt less important. He opened a drawer, cleared a space, and carefully laid the tape inside. Right next to the letter Coach had written, the one that said, "I'll be there." He closed the drawer, not to hide it, but to preserve it. Outside, the day had begun to dim. The sky was a wash of orange and deep blue, the same kind of sky that used to hang over the outdoor courts where he learned how to be relentless. Where Coach had made him do the same drill 100 times until it wasn't about skill, it was about heart. He stepped outside and looked at the basketball court behind his home. Private. Quiet. A full-size court that hadn't seen many games in recent years. He used to come out here just to think. But tonight, something different pulled at him. He walked over, grabbed a ball from the rack, and stood at the top of the key. The wind was still. No crowd. No cameras. Just him. And in his mind, he could hear the voice again, sharper than memory. "Set your feet. Balance. Don't rush the release." He dribbled once. Rose up. Shot. Swish. The sound hit different without the noise of an arena. It echoed clean into the night, as pure as the first time he'd nailed a jumper in front of Coach Taylor. He kept shooting. Quietly. Methodically. No overthinking. No pressure. Just rhythm and love for the game. For the boy who stayed in the gym when the lights were off. For the coach who never asked for thanks. Who never sought attention. Who believed greatness had nothing to do with applause and everything to do with what you do when no one's watching. Michael kept shooting until darkness made it hard to see the rim. He walked back inside, feeling lighter than he had in years. He wasn't chasing something anymore. Not legacy. Not perfection. Not approval. That had already come from the one person who mattered most. Days passed. Then weeks. The gym dedication faded from the news. But Michael didn't forget. He had a replica of the court's dedication plaque made and mounted it on the wall of his home theater, right above the empty seat. He never sat in it again. And he never let anyone else sit in it either. Some things are sacred. One afternoon, he invited a few former teammates over. Just to talk. Not about stats or rings. Just about life. A couple hours in, one of them brought up Coach Taylor. "You think he really came to the game?" one asked. Michael smiled. He didn't just come. He watched it from the best seat in the house. They looked at him, curious, but didn't ask more. They didn't have to. There was something in his voice that told them it was true, even if the details stayed unspoken. Later that night, after everyone left, Michael returned to the theater alone. He sat in his usual seat, not to rewatch the game, but just to be still. "I think you knew," he said quietly to the empty chair beside him. "Even when I didn't." He pulled the journal from the drawer, flipped to the back, and wrote one last entry. "I spent a lifetime trying to live up to the man you saw in me. And maybe, just maybe, I did." He closed it gently. The next day, he started coaching at a local youth camp. No fanfare. No announcements. He just showed up with a whistle and a pair of sneakers. The kids were stunned at first, then confused. "Why would you want to coach us?" Michael just grinned. "Because someone once showed me how to play the game right. Time I passed it on." And he did. Not by yelling. Not by showing off. But by listening, by observing, by making each kid feel like they mattered. Just like Coach had done. The camp grew over time. But he kept it small enough to know every name. Every story. Every weakness they were afraid to show. One afternoon, a shy kid came up to him after practice. "Coach Jordan," the kid asked, "why do you always leave that chair empty over there?" Michael glanced at the bench beside the court. The one that was always left untouched. He smiled. "That's for the guy who taught me how to show up. Even when nobody else did." The kid nodded, not quite understanding, but sensing it was something important. And so it stayed. The court. The empty chair. The quiet moments. And somewhere in the wind, if you listened close, you could almost hear the voice that shaped the greatest to ever do it. Again. Set your feet. Find your center. And this time, Michael Jordan had.